Sarah lived on a small farm nestled in a valley where the sun shone bright and the wind whispered secrets through the tall grass. But lately, the sunshine felt a little dimmer, and the wind seemed to carry a sad song. Her husband, Thomas, had been gone for 6 months, leaving her alone to care for the farm and the little one growing inside her. Being pregnant and alone was hard. The cows needed milking, the chickens needed feeding, and the fields needed tending. Thomas had always been there to help, his strong hands making every task easier. Now, Sarah struggled to lift heavy buckets and her back ached constantly. She missed Thomas terribly. More than the physical work, Sarah missed the companionship. Evenings were the hardest. She'd sit on the porch, watching the fireflies blink in the twilight, wishing Thomas was beside her, sharing stories and laughter. She prayed every night for strength, for guidance, and maybe, just maybe, for someone to share her life with again. She wasn't looking for someone to replace Thomas. Never that. But she longed for a friend, a partner, someone to help her raise her child and fill the empty space in her heart. The farm felt so big, so empty, with just her and her growing baby. It was a lonely life, being a pregnant widow. She often wondered how she would manage. One afternoon, Martha, Sarah's best friend since grade school, came bouncing up the porch steps, a newspaper clutched in her hand. Martha was a whirlwind of energy, always ready with a joke or a helping hand. Seeing Sarah's weary face, Martha immediately launched into action. "Sarah, darling, you look like you haven't slept in a week. You need a break." Martha unfolded the newspaper and pointed to a bold headline, "Town's first annual bachelor auction." Sarah sighed. "A bachelor auction? Martha, you know I'm not interested in things like that." "Oh, come on, Sarah. It'll be fun. Besides, it's for a good cause. They're raising money for new books for the school. And," Martha winked, "you never know. You might just find someone to help you around the farm." Sarah shook her head. "I doubt it.
Besides, I'm pregnant."
"Who would want to?" "Nonsense," Martha interrupted. "You're beautiful, Sarah, and strong, and anyone would be lucky to have you. Just come. No pressure to bid on anyone. Just come, have some lemonade, and watch the show. It'll do you good to get out of the house." Sarah hesitated. The idea of being surrounded by eligible bachelors, all vying for attention, made her uncomfortable. But Martha was right. She did need to get out, and the school really did need new books. "Okay," Sarah finally agreed. "I'll go, but just to watch." The day of the auction arrived, sunny and warm. Sarah, dressed in a simple blue dress that hid her growing belly, felt a flutter of nervousness as Martha led her towards the town square. A makeshift stage had been set up, decorated with colorful banners and balloons. Rows of chairs were filled with women of all ages, buzzing with anticipation. The auctioneer, a jovial man with a booming voice, stood on the stage, microphone in hand. "Welcome, ladies, to our first ever bachelor auction," he announced. "All proceeds will go to the children of our wonderful town school." One by one, the bachelors were presented. There was the handsome blacksmith, flexing his muscles to appreciative whistles. Then came the charming baker, offering samples of his delicious cookies. A young schoolteacher blushed as the women bid generously for his company. Some men showed off talents, like singing or juggling. Others just smiled and hoped for the best. Sarah watched the spectacle with amusement and a touch of discomfort. Some of the women were practically throwing money at the bachelors, while others giggled and whispered amongst themselves. It all felt a bit strange. She was glad she'd only come to observe. She sipped her lemonade, feeling more like an outsider than ever. This wasn't her world anymore. Her world was the farm and the baby growing inside her. The world of husbands and auctions felt distant and unreal. Just when Sarah thought she'd seen it all, the auctioneer called out, "Next up, we have Jake." A hush fell over the crowd. Jake walked slowly onto the stage, his head bowed. He was a cowboy, but unlike the others, he didn't swagger or smile. His clothes were worn, and he had a noticeable limp. A faded scar ran across his left cheek. He looked like he'd seen better days. The auctioneer tried to put on a cheerful face. Jake here is a man of few words, but he's a hard worker and knows his way around a ranch. He paused, but the women remained silent. No one seemed interested. Sarah watched Jake, her heart aching for him. He looked so vulnerable, so out of place. The other bachelors had been confident and eager, but Jake just seemed defeated. She noticed the way he avoided eye contact, the slump of his shoulders. He reminded her a little of a wounded animal, cornered and scared. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Anyone want to start the bidding at $5? Still silence. A few women whispered to each other, shaking their heads. Sarah felt a pang of anger. It wasn't fair. Just because he was injured and down on his luck didn't mean he deserved to be ignored. $5, the auctioneer repeated, his voice losing its enthusiasm. Anyone? Going once. Before she could think about it, before she could analyze the consequences, the words were out of her mouth. $5. Sarah called out, her voice trembling slightly. The auctioneer's head snapped up, his eyes widening in surprise. Do I hear $5? From the lovely lady in blue. He beamed at Sarah. Going once, going twice. Sarah felt 100 pairs of eyes on her. Martha gasped beside her, squeezing her arm. Sarah hadn't intended to bid. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision, driven by pity and a strange sense of protectiveness. The auctioneer paused, looking around the crowd. No one else seemed inclined to bid. Sold. To the lady in blue for $5. He banged his gavel, and a ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Jake looked up, his eyes meeting Sarah's for the first time. There was a flicker of surprise in his gaze, quickly replaced by confusion. He looked almost scared. Sarah gave him a small, reassuring smile, hoping he wouldn't think she was crazy. What had she done? She had no idea what she was going to do with a broken cowboy. But somehow, she knew she couldn't just let him stand there, unwanted and alone. It just didn't feel right. She'd figure it out later. Right now, she had a cowboy to collect. After the auction, Sarah awkwardly approached Jake, who was standing off to the side, looking even more lost than before. Martha trailed behind her, a mixture of amusement and concern on her face. Hello, Jake, Sarah said softly, offering him a tentative smile.
I'm Sarah.
Jake nodded, his gaze fixed on the ground.
Mom.
I guess I'm the one who, bought you, Sarah stammered, feeling ridiculous. I hope you don't mind. Jake finally looked up, his blue eyes filled with a weariness that tugged at Sarah's heart. I don't understand, he said, his voice raspy. Why would you bid on me? Sarah took a deep breath. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure, she admitted. I felt bad. And, well, I could use some help around the farm. Light work, mostly. Feeding the chickens, mending fences, things like that. If you're interested, that is. Jake's eyes widened slightly. You mean, you're offering me a job? Yes, Sarah said firmly. Room and board and a small wage. If you're willing to work, I'm willing to give you a chance. Jake hesitated, then slowly nodded. I don't know how to thank you, ma'am. I'd be glad to help. Good, Sarah said, relieved. Then let's go home. It's a long drive back to the farm. She turned to Martha. Thanks for coming with me, Martha. I'll see you soon. Martha gave Sarah a knowing look and a wink. You take care now, Sarah. And you too, Jake. As Sarah and Jake walked away, Martha couldn't help but wonder if this unexpected purchase might just be the answer to Sarah's prayers. The drive back to the farm was quiet. Jake mostly stared out the window, watching the fields roll by. Sarah stole glances at him, wondering what he was thinking. He seemed like a good man, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd bitten off more than she could chew. When they arrived at the farm, Sarah showed Jake to a small, tidy room above the barn. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and comfortable. This is where Thomas used to stay when he needed some time to himself, Sarah explained. I hope it's all right. Jake looked around the room, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. It's perfect, ma'am. Thank you. The next morning, Jake was up before dawn, ready to work. Sarah assigned him the task of feeding the chickens and collecting the eggs. He moved slowly, favoring his injured leg, but he was thorough and gentle with the animals. The chickens seemed to sense his kindness, clucking softly around him. Sarah watched him from the kitchen window, a sense of relief washing over her. He wasn't just taking advantage of her offer. He was genuinely trying to help. He seemed to have a natural way with the animals, something she always appreciated. Later that day, Jake started mending a section of the fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. He worked steadily, his brow furrowed in concentration. Even with his limp, he was surprisingly efficient. Sarah realized that maybe, just maybe, she'd made the right decision. Perhaps Jake was exactly what she and the farm needed. As the weeks passed, Jake became an indispensable part of the farm. He noticed Sarah struggling to carry heavy buckets of water to the garden and quietly started doing it for her. He saw her wincing as she bent over to weed the flower beds and offered to take over, his large hands surprisingly gentle with the delicate plants. He even started cooking some of the meals, surprising Sarah with his simple but delicious dishes. He'd learned from his mother, he explained, while traveling the rodeo circuit. Sarah found herself looking forward to mealtimes, not just for the food, but for the conversation. Jake was a man of few words, but he was a good listener. He'd sit with Sarah on the porch in the evenings, listening patiently as she talked about Thomas, about her worries about the baby, about her dreams for the farm. He didn't offer advice unless she asked, but his quiet presence was comforting. One day, Sarah found herself unable to reach a jar of preserves on a high shelf. Before she could grab a chair, Jake was there, easily reaching the jar and handing it to her with a smile. "Here you go, ma'am," he said. "Anything else I can help you with?" Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just the physical help. It was the thoughtfulness, the way he anticipated her needs. Jake wasn't just a hired hand. He was becoming a friend, and Sarah realized that she was starting to rely on him, not just for the work, but for something more, something she hadn't felt since Thomas was gone. One evening, after a particularly long day, Sarah and Jake found themselves sitting on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was still and warm, filled with the scent of honeysuckle. "So," Sarah began, "how did you get that scar?" She'd been curious for weeks, but too polite to ask. Jake hesitated, then touched the scar self-consciously. "Rodeo accident," he said quietly. "Tried to ride a bull that wasn't too happy to see me. He won." Sarah winced. "That sounds awful." Jake shrugged. "It was a long time ago. It's just a reminder that I'm not invincible." He then shared stories of his travels, the rodeos he'd competed in, the friends he'd made along the way. Sarah, in turn, told him about growing up on the farm, about her love for the land, about her dreams of raising her child in the same peaceful setting. They discovered a shared love for animals, for the quiet beauty of nature, for the simple things in life. Sarah saw Jake's good heart, his quiet strength, his genuine kindness. Jake saw Sarah's resilience, her unwavering spirit, her determination to provide a good life for her child. He admired her strength, especially given everything she'd been through. They found common ground in their shared losses and their hopes for the future. The more they talked, the more they realized how much they had in common. A bond was forming between them, stronger than either of them expected. One dark and stormy night, a fierce storm rolled through the valley. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, and the rain lashed against the windows. Lightning illuminated the sky, followed by deafening claps of thunder. Sarah woke with a start, her heart pounding. She knew she had to get the animals to safety. The barn roof was old, and she worried it wouldn't hold up in the storm. She threw on her boots and ran outside, battling against the wind and rain. Jake was already there, struggling to herd the cows into the barn. Despite his limp, he moved with surprising speed and determination. "Sarah, get back inside," he shouted over the wind. "It's too dangerous for you out here." "I need to help," Sarah yelled back. Together, they managed to get the cows and chickens safely inside the barn. Then, they worked to secure the windows of the farmhouse, boarding them up with planks of wood. As they struggled to lift a heavy plank, Sarah slipped on the wet ground. Jake caught her before she fell, his strong arms wrapping around her protectively. For a moment, they stood there, clinging to each other, the storm raging around them. Later, huddled inside the farmhouse, listening to the storm howl outside, Sarah realized how much she had come to rely on Jake. He hadn't hesitated to risk his own safety to protect her and the animals. He was strong, dependable, and kind. In that moment, Sarah knew that Jake was more than just a hired hand. He was her partner, her protector, and maybe, just maybe, something more. As if the storm wasn't enough, Sarah's water broke in the middle of the night. Panic surged through her. The doctor lived miles away, and with the storm raging, there was no way to reach him. "Jake!" she cried out, her voice filled with pain. "The baby's coming." Jake rushed to her side, his face etched with concern. He helped her into bed and tried to call the doctor, but the phone lines were down. They were on their own. Despite his own fear, Jake remained calm and collected. He remembered stories his grandmother had told him about delivering babies on the frontier. He gathered clean towels, boiled water, and did everything he could to make Sarah comfortable. "You can do this, Sarah," he said, his voice soothing. "I'm here with you. Just breathe." Hours passed, filled with pain and exhaustion. Jake stayed by Sarah's side, wiping her brow, offering words of encouragement, and reminding her to breathe. He was amazed by her strength and courage. Finally, with a final push, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Jake carefully cleaned the baby and placed her in Sarah's arms. Sarah looked up at Jake, her eyes filled with tears of joy and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I couldn't have done it without you." Jake smiled, his heart overflowing with emotion. He had never felt so needed, so important in his life. He looked at Sarah and the baby, and he knew that his life had changed forever. He was no longer just a broken cowboy. He was part of a family. To Sarah's surprise, Jake proved to be a natural with the baby. He held her gently, cooing softly and singing her old cowboy lullabies. He helped Sarah with the late-night feedings, his presence a comforting reassurance during those long, sleepless hours. He learned how to change diapers, his large hands surprisingly deft and careful. He even managed to soothe the baby when she was fussy, rocking her gently in his arms until she drifted off to sleep. Sarah watched him with a mixture of amazement and gratitude. She had expected him to be awkward and uncomfortable around a baby, but he seemed to have an innate understanding of what she needed. He became an important part of their lives, not just as a helper on the farm, but as a caregiver and a friend. He would tell the baby stories about the ranch, about the animals, about the wide-open spaces. He'd even take her outside with him while he worked, carrying her in a sling close to his chest. The baby, whom Sarah named Lily, seemed to adore Jake. She would gurgle and smile whenever he was near, her tiny hands reaching out to touch his face. Seeing them together, Sarah's heart would swell with a warmth she hadn't thought possible. Jake wasn't just helping her. He was helping her raise her child. He was becoming a father figure to Lily, and Sarah couldn't imagine her life without him. The empty space in her heart was starting to fill, not with a replacement for Thomas, but with a new kind of love, a love that was unexpected, precious, and deeply cherished. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah couldn't deny the truth any longer. She was falling in love with Jake. It wasn't the same kind of love she had felt for Thomas. This was different, a quieter, deeper connection built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and a growing sense of family. But the thought of opening her heart again terrified her. Thomas would always hold a special place in her heart, and she worried that loving Jake would somehow be a betrayal of his memory. What would people think? A widow falling for the cowboy she bought at an auction? It sounded like something out of a silly story, not real life. She tried to push her feelings down, to convince herself that she was just grateful for his help. But every time she saw him holding Lily, every time he smiled at her, every time he offered a helping hand, her heart would flutter. She found herself watching him more often, noticing the way the sunlight caught in his hair, the way his brow furrowed when he was concentrating, the gentle way he spoke to the animals. She loved his quiet strength, his unwavering kindness, his genuine goodness. One evening, as they sat on the porch swing, Lily asleep in her bassinet beside them, Sarah found herself staring at Jake. He turned and caught her gaze, his blue eyes filled with warmth. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Sarah knew she couldn't keep her feelings hidden forever, but she was so scared. What if he didn't feel the same way? What if she got hurt again? It was easier to protect her heart, to keep it locked away. But was it the right thing to do? What Sarah didn't know was that Jake was struggling with his own set of feelings. He too had fallen in love with her. He admired her strength, her kindness, her unwavering love for Lily. He loved the way she laughed, the way she cared for the farm, the way she made him feel like he belonged. But he was afraid. He was just a broken cowboy, scarred both inside and out. He had nothing to offer her, not really. He couldn't replace Thomas, and he certainly wasn't good enough for a woman like Sarah. He worried about his injury. Would he be able to provide for her and Lily? Would he be able to protect them? He remembered the looks of pity he'd received at the auction, the whispers behind his back. He was damaged goods, and Sarah deserved someone whole, someone strong, someone who could give her everything she deserved. He also carried the weight of his past. He'd made mistakes, bad choices that he regretted deeply. He didn't want to burden Sarah with his baggage. He wanted her to be happy, and he didn't think he could make her happy. So he kept his feelings hidden, burying them deep inside. He continued to help around the farm, to care for Lily, to be a friend to Sarah. But every time he looked at her, every time he held her hand, his heart ached with a longing he couldn't express. He was caught between his love for her and his fear of not being good enough. He prayed that somehow, Martha, with her keen eyes and unwavering loyalty, had noticed the unspoken connection between Sarah and Jake long before either of them were willing to admit it. She saw the way Sarah's eyes lit up when Jake entered the room, the way Jake always seemed to be near Sarah, offering his help and support. One afternoon, Martha came to visit, bringing a basket of freshly baked cookies. She found Sarah sitting on the porch swing, watching Jake as he played with Lily in the yard. "He's good with her, isn't he?" Martha said, settling down beside Sarah. Sarah smiled, her gaze softening. "He's wonderful with her. I don't know what I would do without him." Martha took a cookie and chewed thoughtfully. "You know, Sarah," she said, "it's okay to be happy again. Thomas wouldn't want you to be alone forever." Sarah sighed. "I know, but it's not that simple. I'm scared, Martha. What if I get hurt again? What if you don't?" Martha countered. "What if Jake is the answer to your prayers? He clearly cares about you and Lily. Anyone can see that." Sarah shook her head. "He's just being kind. He probably feels sorry for me." "Oh, Sarah," Martha said, exasperated. "Don't you see? He's in love with you. He looks at you the same way Thomas used to. You deserve to be happy, Sarah. And so does he. Don't let fear hold you back. Tell him how you feel. You might be surprised." Martha paused and put her hand on Sarah's arm. Life is too short to not take a chance on love. Taking Martha's words to heart, Sarah decided to be brave. That evening, after Lily was asleep, she found Jake sitting on the porch, gazing at the stars. "Jake," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Can I talk to you about something?" Jake turned, his blue eyes filled with concern. "Of course, Sarah. What's wrong?" Sarah took a deep breath. I need to be honest with you. I've been trying to ignore it, but I can't anymore. I'm falling in love with you, Jake." Jake stared at her, his mouth slightly ajar. He looked completely stunned. "Sarah, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Sarah said quickly, her cheeks flushing. "I just needed you to know. I understand if you don't feel the same way." She turned to leave, her heart sinking. "Sarah, wait," Jake called out, reaching for her hand. "I do feel the same way. I'm in love with you too." Sarah turned back, her eyes widening in disbelief. You are. Jake nodded, his gaze earnest. I have been for a while now, but I didn't think I was good enough for you. I thought you deserved someone better. Oh, Jake, Sarah said, tears welling up in her eyes. You're exactly what I need. You're kind, you're strong, you're good with Lily. You're everything I've ever prayed for. Jake smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that lit up his face. Does this mean? Yes, Jake, Sarah said, her voice filled with emotion. It means I want to be with you. I want us to be a family. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as Jake reached out and gently wiped them away. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in a warm, comforting embrace. I love you, Sarah, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. More than you know. Sarah hugged him tightly, burying her face in his chest. I love you too, Jake, she said, her voice muffled. So much. In that moment, all their fears and insecurities melted away. They were no longer a widow and a broken cowboy. They were just two people who loved each other, finally acknowledging the truth that had been in their hearts all along. They held each other for a long time, savoring the feeling of being together, of being loved, of being safe. The stars twinkled above them, as if celebrating their newfound happiness. The farm, once a place of loneliness and sorrow, now felt like a haven, a place of love and belonging. From that day forward, Sarah and Jake were inseparable. They worked together on the farm, sharing the joys and the burdens. They cared for Lily, watching her grow and thrive. They laughed together, they cried together, they supported each other through thick and thin. They were a family, bound by love, respect, and a shared commitment to building a life together. They had found love in the most unexpected of places, and they were grateful for every moment they had together. The little $5 auction had brought them more than just a helping hand. It had brought them a lifetime of love and happiness. A few months later, the farm was buzzing with life and laughter. Sarah, Jake, and Lily were a happy family, their days filled with love and joy. Jake's limp was still there, but he was stronger now, both physically and emotionally. He had found a purpose, a family to care for, and a love that healed his wounded heart. Sarah had found love and companionship again, just like she had prayed for. She still missed Thomas, but she knew that he would have wanted her to be happy. And she was happy, happier than she had ever thought possible. Lily was thriving, growing into a bright and cheerful little girl. She had two loving parents who adored her and a farm full of animals to play with. One sunny afternoon, Sarah and Jake were sitting on the porch swing, watching Lily chase butterflies in the yard. Sarah leaned her head against Jake's shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips. I can't believe how lucky we are, she said softly, to have found each other in such an unexpected way. Jake wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. It was fate, Sarah, he said. We were meant to be together. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with love and gratitude. They were a family, built on love, kindness, and a little bit of luck. And they were grateful for every moment they had together. Sarah had bought a broken cowboy at an auction, unaware that he would love her like she'd prayed for. And Jake had found a home, a family, and a love that healed his soul. They were both living proof that sometimes the greatest blessings come in the most unexpected packages.